Good afternoon, everyone. I don't know how you feel, but I'm start getting hungry already. So I won't talk about many technical things, but I want to sell you something, guys. So how many of you already work on healthcare problem? A few? You guys are already very satisfied, very happy, and there's so many problems to solve, and a lot of funding, maybe also say that out there. And it's really an important problem that you should think about. And many of the students approach you after this, right, in the poster session. I think you should change your research direction, right? Talk to your advisor, really ask, what about the healthcare problem, right? And so if you have more questions after this, and talk to me. So I'll show you some example in my lab what we worked on. And so we're a whole bunch of computer scientists mostly. And if you wonder how much medical background you know, the answer is very limited. I do have one MD PhD students in my lab, so it's one exception. But other than that, all computer science students, but they do care about real world application. When we say we do care about real world application, I mean we publish in medical domain. So we're not just getting a data set, run a cute algorithm, show some performance better than baseline. We do care about the domain. So that's the difference. And we do need a lot of collaboration, right? So this getting data, getting problem, getting collaborators. So these are all the current collaborators we have. Some are on the medical domains, and like medical hospitals, Children's Healthcare Atlanta, Sutter Health here actually, Geisinger and so on. And medical schools, Vanderbilt, Northwestern, Emory, UT, and also technology company, and then one pharmaceutical company. So what do we do? So our research is actually quite straightforward. We work on one problem, that is predictive modeling. All right, so we want to build all kinds of predictive models using electronic health records, such as predicting disease risk, recommending treatments instead of recommending product, books. What about treatment? Right? That's more important problems in my mind. And estimating cost, all those type of problems need to analyze a large amount of electronic health record, build predictive models. Just some more concrete evidence this is important. If you look at the publications in PubMed, which is search engine for all the biomedical literatures, you see the number of publications with keyword predictive models or EHR is increasing each year. Especially for the past 5 years, the interest in electronic health records is really exploding, right? And the building predictive model using EHR data is the trend, as something you have to care about. So now we want to build a predictive model for healthcare applications. What are the requirements, right? So if you want to go talk to your collaborator, future collaborator, for example, who is medical doctors or executive in the pharmaceutical companies, you said, okay, I have a cool machine learning algorithms, very scalable system to build machine learning models, and what are the things they cares about? They care about efficiency, because in the health domain, the good thing is there's plenty of problems. I never worry about bringing some smarter computer scientists like David or Bubbies to this area, because there's just too many problems to work on. Just think about the number of diseases out there, tens of thousands. Each one of them, you need the predictive models. And how many medications are out there? Also tens of thousands, right? Each medication, you can build a recommendation model for that. So it's just tons of problems to work on. And so the question is, can you do it quickly? If every model takes you a year to build, that's probably too long. And how can you do it quickly? So efficiency is important. The second thing is interpretation. Say you have a very good black box model, and you want the doctors to use it at the point of care. You say, okay, this patient have high risk of developing heart failure. Even the model is super accurate, you still need an interpretation after that. Why? Why you think this guy has a heart failure risk? and what should they do about that, right? So interpretation is very key. And the third thing is accuracy, right? Just think about the ramification if you make a wrong prediction, right? Somebody, say you want to predict mortality, but your prediction is just off, right? That's very, can have a very negative impact. So these are the three kind of requirements in the healthcare domain if you want to build predictive model that cares about. So I'll give you some example how we approach each one of them in my group. The first one, efficiency, right? So how can you build predictive model quickly? This is more related to a lot of machine learning systems these days, right? Do parallel predictive modeling, pipelines, search large modeling space, find the right algorithm, and find the right parameters. And the second thing is for interpretation, right? So we'll show you one example. We use non-negative tensor factorizations to find interesting patient clusters that are interpretable, and in the medical domain, they call that phenotypes. And the last one, accuracy. So we use some of the deep learning model these days, in this case, recurrent neural network, to predict heart failure using this longitudinal patient records. Not so much about method, because I heard many talks that, from this audience, you know this method very well, but think about the application. So the first one, efficiency. Parallel predictive model platform. So this is a collaboration with a group of students in my lab, Hangsu, Yu Jiang, Sangtai An, and Kunal Mahadran. And so the problem, so give you one example of predictive model in the health space, right? So we work with a pharmaceutical company that specializes in anti-epilepsy drugs. So epilepsy is a very devastating disease. There's about 2.2 million patients with epilepsy in US alone, and every year there's about 150,000 new cases developed with epilepsy in US. The primary treatment choices is taking drugs, and there's no cure, so you have to keep taking anti-epilepsy drugs for life long if you can find the one that works for you. And just make a guess, right? So I say, unfortunately, if you have epilepsy, and I'm a doctor, I prescribe anti-epilepsy drugs to you for the first time, what's the chance that drug will work for you? What's the probability that drug will just work for you? Who think it's greater than 90%? 80%? 70? Start showing up. 50%? You would think that at least 50% chance it should work, right? How can this drug get approved if it's below 50%? Well, unfortunately, it's about 32% of time it works. And if you try really hard, try different combinations and different drugs, there's another about 24% of patients can eventually find the right treatment. So that's the group we cares about in this setting. Right? If we know the drug exists already, we just need to find the right combination or the right sequence to try it. And usually it takes 2 to 5 years for a given patient to find the drugs in that group. You may think, okay, is that a big deal? Like, okay, it takes 2 years, but eventually you find something works. And so we actually talked to a patient advocate for epilepsy. So she is kind of unlucky, but she eventually spent 2 years to find the drug work for her. At the time, I asked her, okay, how important it is if my algorithm can help you to find the drug right away, save that 2 years. Is that a big deal to you? She almost cried because within those 2 years, she lost her job, lost her house, and of course, she lost her driver's license, and then stay in the shelter for several years, then have to move, very depressed. So there's a huge psychosocial implication to those patients when they search for the right drug works for them. And the drug you don't know whether it works right away because it has to take several months, at least 6 months, to try out the right dosage and so on. So it's a very complicated search problem. You don't want to try many things very quickly. And now let's see, instead of talking about the solution, let me show you just what we can achieve. Right? So we worked on a large data set, and here's the performance of human doctors. And every bar showing a performance for a single drugs for epilepsy. There's about 20 plus epilepsy drugs out there. This is our 15 drugs we have enough data to build model for. And the doctor perform about, I would say 20 to 30% of time, they give prescribed a drug, the drug works. And then we build a whole bunch of models, and the model perform uniformly better. So the improvement is 10% to 160%. Some are quite dramatic. And if you cares about more details, here the accuracy really means a precision, a positive predicted values. And when we say drug works, it means the patient stay on this drug, right? Because it's fine, it's useful, so it's continuous taking this. And so that's what we mean by drug works. So here, that's the result, and machine learning can bring you. But the question is, can you build this model quickly? Right? And especially when you have a large amount of data, a lot of algorithms, combination, a lot of parameter you have to search through, can you do this quickly? In this case, it's about 30 million patients, a few billion records we worked with, and over about 5 years of data. And there's about 100 different drug combination that cares about build a model, but eventually we can only build 15 because of the some of the combination is so rare. And like any of the predictive model process, it's not a single algorithm, right? It's a sequence of computation. And what you want to do is, okay, try different combinations and find the one works the best, right? So computation become challenging. There's, even for a simple task like this, very easily you have hundreds of thousands of pipeline you want to try in order to find a good model. And so what are the computational tricks you can apply to make this process faster? The first one is pretty obvious, right? Since there's a lot of pipelines, you can run it in parallel. You can build a DAG and have all the unique combination and the dependencies, then do a topological sort. Then you can run things in parallel whenever possible. And the second idea is not sampling, right? So it's not all those pipelines are promising. Some algorithms are not that good. After search through that once, you don't have to go through that algorithm again if you think that's not promising. So we do some Bayesian optimization here. In this case, a two-level Bayesian optimization to search for algorithms, then for the promising algorithm, fine-tune the parameters. Okay, so we'll go through this very quickly. So you have the dependency graph of all those pipelines. Then you can just go through this topologically and whenever possible, run this in parallel, right? So that's just the first step, right? So it's just one example. If you just do that alone, for training a single model, a small data set, right, really. For larger data set, you can even get a better performance gain on a single machine, right? This is just on a single machine because the problem is not that large. Still, you can see a 60-fold improvement in speed saving. So time saving. So it's used to run 10 hours, now you can run it in 10 minutes. And now you can add sampling. So when we do the Bayesian optimizations, not all those algorithms are promising, right? So maybe a portion of that is really worth trying. Construct a feature, then try some simple algorithm. I mean, runs like like random forest, for example. So, but you have to find the right path, right? And that's the second thing we have done. And in this particular case, here's just showing over time how well the different algorithm performs. There's two different Bayesian optimization. The green one is ours. And so this one, Then there's oracle method. That is, if you know the right algorithm to use, all you need to do is just fine-tune parameters. So that's the best possible hope you can have, but that's not possible. But then our method can save a lot of times comparing to some state-of-the-art Bayesian optimization approach. So the key idea is to do this search in 2 steps, right? Find the algorithm first, then fine-tune parameter. Don't tune the parameter right away because you can waste a lot of time there. Okay, so when I present this in full, usually I will show them the system. Actually, you can build the predictive models in 7 minutes, and I have a video if you're curious about that, and I come to see this offline. And so the second part, this first part is about efficiency, right? And that's more of a typical thing you do, but you want to do it quickly. The second thing is you want this thing to be interpretable. And here we use tensor factorization for that. And this is another joint work with actually many collaborators here. Joyce Ha from Emory, Jody Gosh from UT Austin, Steve from Cripps, and Buzz Stewart from Sutter Health, and Vanderbilt's Josh Stania, Brad Marlin. So it's a big, actually NSF-funded project on computational phenotyping using tensor factorization. So what is phenotyping? So this is really the hottest problem right now in healthcare informatics. That is, you have all those raw data, right, from EHR and patient demographics, diagnosis, medication, clinical notes, lab tests, medication, a lot of things. Nobody wants to deal with that directly, and no doctor or patients want to look at the raw data, and this raw data become bigger and bigger, right? So they want some process called phenotyping, turn this into something meaningful and nice and medical concepts, such as disease severity, and so on. So every phenotype, think about this is really a clustering problem, right? Every phenotype is a group of patients. It's a soft clustering because every patient can have multiple phenotypes, but every phenotype is a cluster. And there's a lot of effort put into developing those type of algorithms. For example, the most popular phenotyping algorithm usually is a decision tree or some kind of tree like this. For example, you want to find type 2 diabetes patients, then you just go through this decision tree, then eventually those become type 2 diabetes cases. But not all the phenotyping efforts is supervised, right? So for some disease conditions or disease subtype, you don't really understand well. So you can't even come up with this because there's no training data, labeled training data, and or experts don't really understand well. So in this case, you need unsupervised method, and that's interpretable. So what we have done is use a tensor factorization method to approach these problems. So we represent EHR data as a tensor. For example, here we have third-order tensor with patient diagnosis and medication, 3 modes, and every element is intersection of the 3. For this patient, this guy had this diagnosis. For treating this disease, this medication being prescribed. So we use non-negative tensor factorization to factorize this because this population is a combination of multiple phenotypes, right? We think, okay, each rank 1 tensor give us a cluster of 1 phenotypes, and also tells us the interpretation of the phenotypes, like what diagnoses are relevant, what medication are relevant. There's multiple of them. And here's one example, right? 40% of patients has this phenotypes, meaning that the 40% of entry here in the patient mode vector is non-zero. The rest are 0, means they don't have this phenotypes. Then only 1 diagnosis are relevant, hypertension, and for treating hypertension, the 3 medications are commonly given. So these are type of phenotypes that doctors or even patients understood. And the challenge is you want this list to be small, right? You don't want a long list. and there's a lot of details going to how do we construct that algorithm, which I will not talk about. Just show you some example of those phenotypes. This is really the result, and meaning that we didn't kind of fine-tune this or clean up this, and all of this are presented to a cardiologist, and he provides a label for each of those clusters. And here's just some examples. Overall, 80% of them are clinically meaningful. And here's just one example of not only we can find the clusters, some of those actually corresponding to different disease subtypes. Right? These are all hypertension phenotypes, but they have different severity just because the different medications are being used here. Okay, so that's the second part. And the key thing here is we propose unsupervised phenotyping algorithms to deal with EHR data. And finally, very quickly, to show you using deep learning to build a predictive models for heart failure. So this is collaboration with my students, Edward Choi, and folks here at Sutter Health, Andy True and Buzz Stewart. So we focus on heart failure because this is very challenging problems and also very costly. Number one cost driver for Medicare. And we want to reduce costs. And so to reduce costs, you really want to detect the disease earlier. So that's what we focus on. Can we detect heart failure 6 months to a year before the actual diagnosis? If we can do that, there can change the clinical guideline for heart failure prevention. So traditional, predictive model pipeline, as I showed you in the first part, pretty much look like this, right? You find out what target you want to predict, in this case, heart failure. Then you construct the patient data set, a cohort. Then we extract a whole bunch of features, or then do some feature selection, build a set of classifier, and try different evaluation metric, find the right one. So for deep learning, it's really, you just combine this 3 steps, right? For feature engineering and predictive model, they all combine together. So the data we're dealing with here is sequential data. You have EHR data over time, right? Somebody has, these are all the medical, this is just a synthetic example, or all the medical events happen for a patient, right? Some symptoms and some drugs being given, and so on, right? So every patient is event sequences, and traditionally, very simply, you can use one hot encoding to encode all those different medical events. Then what we do is we turn that one hot encoding to a better representation. In this case, we just use skipgram or word2vec, so that different but related medical concepts are close to each other. And once we have a better representation, we can push those through RNN, and then this native representation will capture the status of the patients. For example, this is step 0, the first visit for this patient. As this can be multiple layer, of course, but for representation, for simple representation here, we just have one layer. But then this the hidden state for the first visit, then the second visit, and so on. And so this works very well when you have this variable length of event sequences, very straightforward. And finally, you take this as your representation and train a classifier, such as logistic regression. So how well does this perform? And it does perform a lot better than a lot of traditional methods over here, like SVM, logistic regression. And so this 2 different variation of a GRU, RNN models actually achieve 10% improvement. And the representation does matter, right? So that's just using one hot encoding. You can see RNN still works pretty well. What about use something better, right? So not just the one hot encoding, you have all the medical ontology, can you leverage that, right? So if we use the medical ontology to group the relevant code together, that's huge network that has been developed, use a lot of medical knowledge, right? So we group them together. That does improve a little bit, but not as good as if you use just simple data-driven representation, such as word-to-vec, right? So that's actually performed even better than those knowledge-driven representations, such as medical groupers or ontology. So to summarize, and predictive modeling in healthcare application is very, very important. There's a lot of such application. You really need to develop this very efficient process and interpretive model and with great accuracy. So with that, I will stop, and there's more things that's actually done in my groups, but if you cares about this domain and thinking about whether you should work in this domain, do talk to me. I'll be here for the next hour. Thanks.